Gunfire echoed in the distance, and the ground shook with explosions as two factions clashed, their soldiers locked in combat. It had started as a peacekeeping mission, but now it had turned into something far worse. The human soldiers, sent to keep the peace between two warring alien races, found themselves caught in the middle of a deadly struggle they never expected. Among the chaos, one soldier stood out. His name was Adam, a young human soldier who had been thrown into the conflict. With little more than basic training and an old rifle, he wasn't a hero, but he was doing his best to survive. His unit had been tasked with protecting civilians, but now they were scrambling to stay alive, dodging gunfire from both sides. Adam's heart pounded in his chest, his breath shallow, as he crouched behind a piece of debris scanning the battlefield. The enemy was unlike anything he had ever seen. The aliens, known as the Zycrians, were towering warriors, their bodies armored in sleek, silver exoskeletons that shimmered in the light of the distant explosions. Their weapons were advanced, their fighting styles brutal, and their eyes, cold and unblinking, scanned the area with deadly precision. Adam had seen Zycrians in training simulations, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He had no idea why they were fighting, or what had started the war. All he knew was that he had to stay alive. Through the smoke and debris, Adam caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. A Zycrian warrior, taller than most, her armor gleaming as she moved with deadly grace across the battlefield. She was a leader, Adam could tell. Her helmet was different from the others, sleeker, more streamlined, and she carried a massive energy sword, the blade crackling with blue energy. She moved like a storm, cutting through the human soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Adam's heart raced. He had to do something. He couldn't just stand there and wait for the inevitable. He quickly scanned his surroundings, looking for an escape route or a way to turn the tables. His eyes landed on a pile of weapons discarded by fallen soldiers nearby. One of them looked like an old-fashioned grenade launcher. It wasn't ideal, but it might give him the edge he needed. Taking a deep breath, Adam dashed toward the weapon, crouching low to avoid the enemy's sight. As he grabbed the grenade launcher, he felt a sudden shift in the air. The ground beneath his feet trembled as the Zycrian warrior, now standing just a few feet away, turned toward him. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. She was an imposing figure, her helmet reflecting the chaos around her, but there was something almost human in her gaze, a flicker of uncertainty. Adam's fingers trembled on the weapon. He could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. He knew he was about to die. He had no chance against her. But then, something strange happened. In a desperate attempt to lighten the mood, to distract himself from the fear coursing through him, Adam blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "Hey, sweetie," he said, his voice shaky, but loud enough for her to hear. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, nothing else mattered. The Zycrian woman froze, her stance suddenly stiff, her sword lowered. It was as if she hadn't heard correctly. The battlefield seemed to pause, the sound of gunfire and explosions fading away as everyone on both sides turned to look. Adam, realizing what he had just said, froze as well. His mind raced, cursing himself for the slip-up. He had no idea what had come over him. Was he really going to die over something as ridiculous as that? He glanced at her, trying to gauge her reaction, but her expression was unreadable. The Zycrian warrior's eyes narrowed, the slightest tilt of her head signaling confusion. She took a slow step forward, her gaze never leaving Adam's. Adam's heart raced, but he stood his ground, unsure of what to do next. The silence stretched on, longer than Adam could bear. His mind scrambled for something to say, some way to explain himself. But before he could speak, something strange happened. The Zycrian warrior's lips parted, and for the first time since he had seen her, she spoke. "Sweetie?" Her voice was deep and measured, though there was a hint of something softer, something curious in her tone. Adam blinked, his mouth dry. He couldn't believe it. He had just called this warrior sweetie, and now she was asking him about it. Of all the things that could have happened, this was the last thing he expected. He swallowed hard, his brain desperately trying to catch up. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, it was just, you look like you're in charge here. And I thought, well, why not lighten the mood? The Zikrian woman studied him carefully, her helmet reflecting his nervous face. She was still processing his words, her head tilted in thought. Adam could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She wasn't just another soldier. She was someone important, maybe even a leader. And here he was, calling her sweetie, like she was a friend. The tension between them felt like it might snap at any moment. Adam stood there, unsure of what would happen next. He could already hear the whispers from the soldiers behind him. They were all watching, waiting to see what would happen. Finally, the Zikrian warrior took another step forward, her gaze softening just a fraction. "You are strange, human," she said, her voice still low but tinged with something that could almost be called amusement. "But I do not know what to make of you." Adam felt his heart skip a beat. She wasn't angry. She wasn't attacking. For a brief moment, it seemed like the entire battlefield had paused, the war itself frozen in time. And then, something even more unexpected happened. The alien warrior woman gave a small nod, a sign of respect. "Perhaps we will talk later, but for now there is no time for distractions." With that, she turned and strode away, her soldiers following her lead. The moment had passed, but the tension remained. Adam stood in place, his mind racing, unable to fully comprehend what had just transpired. The battle, which had seemed so certain moments before, was now uncertain. The human soldiers, still bewildered, lowered their weapons as the Zikrians withdrew. Adam exhaled, his heart still racing. He had no idea what just happened, but one thing was clear. The battle had stopped. For now. And somehow, it had all started with a simple word. "Sweetie." The battlefield was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was as though the air itself was holding its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Adam stood frozen, his hand still gripping the grenade launcher, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hardly believe what had just happened. A moment ago, he had been certain that he was about to die at the hands of the Zikrian warrior, and now she had walked away. The entire battlefield seemed to be in a state of confusion. The human soldiers were staring in disbelief, unsure whether to cheer or prepare for an attack. The Zikrians, usually so swift and ruthless, had halted, mid-charge. They watched their commander, this towering warrior who had just been addressed in a way no one had ever dared. Adam wasn't sure what was more surprising. The fact that the Zikrian woman didn't attack him, or the fact that he had called her sweetie in the first place. The silence hung heavy in the air, and Adam couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed in an instant. He lowered the grenade launcher, his mind still racing. He needed to make sense of what had just occurred, but he didn't know where to start. He had just insulted one of the most powerful warriors he had ever seen, and yet she hadn't reacted the way he expected. In fact, she seemed almost curious. He had expected her to strike him down for his insolence, but instead, she had just walked away. Across the battlefield, the Zikrians were slowly retreating, their commander at the front. Adam's eyes followed her as she moved with calm precision, her posture regal, every step commanding respect. He couldn't help but notice how different she was from the other Zikrians. While most of them wore helmets and exoskeletons that hid their faces, this one's helmet was different. It was sleek, with a narrow visor that allowed her eyes to show through. Her face, though still partially hidden, had a quiet intensity, as if she carried the weight of something far greater than just this battle. Adam's curiosity grew. Who was she? What had made her hesitate when he called her sweetie? He had never heard of a warrior like her, one so powerful and yet unsure of what to do with a simple word. It didn't make sense. There was more to this woman than met the eye. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind him. "Hey, Adam, you okay?" It was one of his fellow soldiers, Greg, who had taken cover next to him. Greg's face was covered in dirt and sweat, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Yeah, I'm fine, Adam replied quickly, though his voice was distant, still lost in the strange encounter. I'm not sure what just happened. Greg raised an eyebrow. You mean when you called that Zikrian commander Sweetie? Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone's wondering about that too. Adam chuckled nervously, running a hand through his messy hair. Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to break the tension. Greg shook his head, still unsure of what to make of it. Well, whatever you did, it worked. No one's firing anymore. The Zikrians are pulling back. Adam glanced over at the retreating Zikrians. It was true. For the first time since the battle had started, there was a strange calm in the air. The soldiers, both human and alien, were still on edge, but the fighting had stopped. The Zikrians, led by their commander, were slowly retreating. The strange silence continued to hang over the battlefield, but it was no longer the heavy, tense kind of silence. Instead, it felt almost curious, like the calm before a storm that might not come. Adam stood among the human soldiers, watching as the Zikrians, once so aggressive and ready to destroy, began to form into neat lines. The battle that had been raging moments before seemed to have vanished, leaving only confusion and uncertainty. The Zikrian warrior woman, the one he had called Sweetie, was still visible on the other side of the field. She had taken her helmet off, her dark hair flowing down past her shoulders. Her face was now fully exposed, and Adam couldn't help but notice the intensity in her eyes. She wasn't like the other Zikrians. She was more human in some ways. There was something in her expression that hinted at a deeper struggle, a weariness beyond the fighting. Do you think it's over? Greg's voice brought Adam back to the present. Greg, one of Adam's closest friends, stood next to him, his eyes darting nervously between the human and Zikrian lines. The rest of their unit was still in position, waiting for orders. I don't know, Adam said quietly, his gaze still fixed on the Zikrian woman. But I think it might be. Greg frowned. What do you mean? You're telling me we just stopped the battle with a word? Because you called her Sweetie? That doesn't make sense. Adam shook his head slowly. I don't know what happened, but it's like she's thinking. I saw it in her eyes. She doesn't want this war anymore. I think she's just as confused as we are about all this. Greg didn't look convinced, but he stayed quiet. The truth was, Adam wasn't sure he believed it either. How could one word, one moment of tension-breaking absurdity, change the course of a battle? How could a human soldier, someone with no political power or military rank, have any influence over the course of a war between two alien races? Still, something in the air felt different. The Zikrians, who had been pushing forward with terrifying power, were now holding back. It was as if they were waiting for something, and Adam somehow was the one who had triggered this change. After a few long moments of watching the two armies stand at a standoff, Adam made a decision. He couldn't wait forever. If there was a chance to end this war, to stop the fighting, it was now. We need to talk to them, he said suddenly, his voice filled with determination. Greg looked at him wide-eyed. What? Are you out of your mind? You want to walk up to them? After everything that's happened? Adam nodded. I don't have a choice. We can't just stand here. The Zikrians might not attack us right now, but they'll find another reason to fight. We need to take control of this moment. If we don't, all the lives lost today will have been for nothing. Greg opened his mouth to argue, but then he closed it. He seemed to understand the gravity of what Adam was saying. After a pause, he nodded slowly. All right, but you better not do anything crazy. With that, Adam began walking toward the Zikrian lines. His heart pounded in his chest. It wasn't like any mission he had ever been on before. There were no orders, no plan. Just him, walking across a battlefield to speak to the enemy. It was risky, foolish even, but in this moment, Adam couldn't think of anything else to do. He had to try. As Adam approached the Zikrians, he noticed that their weapons were still at the ready, though none of them seemed eager to use them. The Zikrian commander, the woman who had paused everything with a mere glance, stood at the front. Her posture was straight, confident, but there was an unreadable expression on her face. She had her back turned toward him but didn't move away as he approached. It was almost as if she was waiting for him. Adam hesitated for a moment, but then took another step forward. He didn't know what to say, but he knew one thing: he had to break the silence again. He couldn't let this chance slip away. "Hey, can we talk?" he called out, his voice unsure but firm. The Zekrian warrior's head turned slightly at the sound of his voice. She didn't speak at first, only watching him carefully, with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Adam could feel the weight of her gaze. It was as if she was judging him, trying to decide if he was worth her time. Finally, she spoke, her voice deep and controlled. "You wish to speak with me?" Adam nodded, his throat dry. "Yeah, I think we should. I don't know what's going on, but it seems like neither of us wants to keep fighting." The warrior's expression softened for just a moment, and Adam caught a glimpse of something unexpected, a flicker of respect, maybe even curiosity. "You are brave, human," she said, her tone even. "Most of your kind would never dare approach me, let alone speak. And yet, you call me sweetie." Adam swallowed hard, feeling embarrassed. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it. It was just, I don't know, a way to break the tension, but I think we've been fighting because we don't understand each other. I don't know what you want, but I know that if we don't talk, this war is just going to keep going." There was a long pause. The Zekrian woman studied him again, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly she nodded. "I have never met a human like you. I believe it is time we spoke." With that, she motioned for one of her soldiers to step forward, and they began to clear a space between the two sides. The human soldiers remained where they were, watching, unsure of what to do. Adam's own squad had gathered behind him, but none of them made a move. "Follow me," the Zekrian warrior commanded, turning and walking toward a nearby tent, where she had clearly set up a temporary command post. Adam glanced back at his comrades, who watched in stunned silence. Then, with one final glance at Greg, who gave him a small, uncertain nod, Adam followed the Zekrian leader into the tent. Inside, the atmosphere was much calmer, though tension still lingered. The Zekrian warrior removed her helmet, revealing more of her face, a face Adam could now see more clearly. Her features were sharp, her skin a pale blue with intricate markings running down her cheeks. She had an alien beauty, but there was something incredibly human about the way her eyes focused on him. "I am Kalia," she said, her voice now softer but still strong. "You may call me by my name, as I will call you by yours. What is it that you seek, human?" Adam took a deep breath. This was it. The moment he had been hoping for. The moment that could change everything. "I'm Adam, and I want peace, that's all. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't think you do either." For the first time, Kalia's lips curled into something close to a smile. "Perhaps you are right, Adam. Perhaps we can find a way to end this. But it will not be easy." Adam nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The conversation had started. And that, at least, was a start. The tent was quiet as Adam sat across from Kalia, the Zekrian warrior. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, but there was a strange sense of understanding between them now, an unspoken agreement that neither of them wanted the war to continue. Adam couldn't believe how far he had come, from the terrified soldier on the battlefield to now sitting face to face with one of the most powerful alien leaders, having a conversation. Kalia studied him, her sharp blue eyes still unreadable. Her alien features were fascinating, yet they held no sign of hostility. Instead, there was something almost familiar in her gaze, something human-like in the way she observed him. "So you want peace," she said finally, her voice steady, almost calm. "But you know that it is not simple. You do not control the forces at play here. Both sides are driven by their own desires. To stop the fighting, you must deal with more than just me." Adam nodded, swallowing hard. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel even more real. The war wasn't just between him and her. It was about the entire conflict, the larger forces that had been shaping the destruction for years. I know it's not going to be easy, but it has to be done. The soldiers, the civilians, everyone is caught in the middle, and we've all lost something. Kalya's eyes softened for a moment. It was brief, but Adam saw the flicker of empathy. She understood more than he thought. You do not understand the full scope of this war, she said slowly. There are powers beyond us, forces that do not want peace, forces that thrive on chaos. Adam leaned forward, his curiosity growing. What do you mean? Kalya hesitated for a moment, as though choosing her words carefully. The factions that fight on both sides have not always been at war. The conflict was ignited by a third force, an outside influence. There are those who seek to keep the war going, as it serves their own interests. They want control, power, and the fighting gives them that. Adam's brow furrowed. Who are these people? And why haven't we heard about them? Kalya let out a deep sigh, almost as if the weight of the truth was heavy on her. They are not just people, Adam. They are organizations, shadowy, entities that operate from the shadows. They manipulate both sides, pulling strings, ensuring that the war never ends. They provide weapons, resources, and fuel the fire that burns between our peoples. Adam's mind raced. He had always known that war had hidden motivations, but hearing it so clearly from the mouth of an enemy leader made it all the more real. It was more than just two sides fighting for dominance. It was a war being controlled by forces far beyond anyone's knowledge or control. If they're pulling the strings, then why do you keep fighting? Adam asked. Why not stop it? Kalya's gaze turned distant, and for a moment Adam wondered if she... The ground beneath Adam's feet trembled with the force of another explosion. Dust and smoke filled the air, making it harder to see. The sounds of battle were growing louder as both sides prepared for a fight that neither of them truly wanted. The Zycrians, led by Kalya, were in position, their weapons drawn, ready to defend themselves. But Adam could sense that the warriors, once filled with blind rage, now hesitated. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were people, caught in the middle of something much bigger than themselves. Adam could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another skirmish, it was a turning point. If they didn't act now, the war would go on forever, and more lives would be lost. He glanced at Kalya, standing tall in front of her, soldiers. Her expression was hard, but Adam saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a leader, and leaders carried burdens. He could see that she was carrying the weight of her people's hopes, their fears, and the future of their world. The world was on the edge of a knife, and it felt like it could tip in either direction. Adam's team was behind him, taking up positions alongside the Zycrians. It felt strange to be standing with the enemy, but it also felt right. The human soldiers weren't just standing there passively. They were ready to fight. They understood what was at stake. They had seen enough of war to know that this moment could change everything. Kalya turned toward him, her eyes sharp, full of determination. The forces behind this war won't stop. We must act quickly or they will destroy us all. Adam nodded, his hand tightening around his weapon. Then we'll fight together. For a moment, the two sides stood in silence, the tension thick in the air. Adam wasn't sure if Kalya was still uncertain about trusting him or if she was still calculating the best way to handle the situation, but it didn't matter now. The enemy was approaching and there was no time for hesitation. Suddenly, the roar of engines filled the air. A group of enemy warships, sleek and menacing, appeared over the horizon. The enemy wasn't just on the ground, they were coming from the sky. The battle was escalating and there was no turning back. Prepare yourselves, Kalya shouted, her voice carrying across the battlefield. We fight for our future. The Zycrian soldiers rallied, their weapons charged, their armor gleaming in the dim light of the evening. Adam's heart raced as he watched the alien warriors prepare for battle. There was no fear in their eyes now, just the same determination he saw in the faces of his own comrades. Adam turned to his team, his voice firm. "We stand with them, no matter what. We're fighting for peace." They all nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. This was about proving that humanity could be more than just conquerors. They had a chance to show the galaxy that people from different worlds could fight side by side for a better future. As the enemy warships began their descent, the ground troops advanced, firing their weapons. The sounds of explosions echoed around them, and the air was thick with the heat of battle. Adam and his team joined the fray, taking down enemies with precise shots covering each other's backs as they fought. But even as they fought, Adam couldn't help but notice something remarkable. The Zycrians, once so ruthless, were now working alongside the humans. They were fighting with discipline, yes, but there was something else. They were fighting with hope. They wanted this to end just as much as the humans did. Adam's heart surged with determination. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for a chance at peace. The enemy forces were relentless, but they weren't as strong as they thought. Kialia's forces, alongside the humans, held their ground, pushing the enemy back. Adam could see it in the Zycrian warriors' eyes. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for their right to live free from the chains of those who had controlled them for so long. The battle raged on, but Adam knew this was their chance. They had to win, not just for themselves, but for the future where the two races, human and Zycrian, could live without the shadow of war hanging over them. Kalia was at the front, leading her troops with strength and skill. Her energy sword cut through the enemy lines with precision, her movements fluid and powerful. Adam was right behind her, covering her back as she led the charge. They were unstoppable together, two different species, united by a common cause. The enemy warships continued to attack from above, their heavy fire hitting the ground with devastating force. Adam could feel the ground shake with each explosion, but he didn't stop. He kept moving, taking out enemy soldiers, working with Kialia to clear the path. Every move they made, every shot they fired, brought them closer to the victory they needed. The enemy's resistance began to falter. They were being pushed back, not by the strength of one army, but by the combined might of two forces who had finally realized they were stronger together. Adam could feel it in his bones. The enemy's control was slipping. The war that had seemed endless was finally coming to an end. And then, just as the final push seemed to be within their grasp, a massive explosion shook the ground beneath them. Adam barely had time to react before the force of the blast sent him tumbling to the ground. His ears rang, and the world spun around him. For a moment, he couldn't see or hear anything. All he could feel was the heat from the explosion and the dust that filled the air. He struggled to his feet, his vision blurred. His head was spinning, but he forced himself to focus. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. He had to keep fighting. They couldn't stop now. As he steadied himself, he saw Kalia through the smoke. She was still standing, her sword raised high as she led her soldiers forward. The enemy was retreating, but there was still a final push to make. He could see the fear in the enemy's eyes. They knew they were losing. The end of the war was in sight. Adam didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his weapon ready, his heart set on the goal. The battle was almost over. The war was almost over. Together, the humans and Zycrians fought side by side, pushing back the enemy forces until the last of them retreated into the distance. The battlefield, once filled with chaos and destruction, was now eerily silent. The war was over. The victory was hard won, but it was a victory nonetheless. Adam looked around at the soldiers, both human and Zycrian, who had fought together. They had done the impossible. They had fought for peace, and they had won. As Kalia stood beside him, her eyes meeting his, Adam knew that this was just the beginning. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had taken the first step toward a new world, a world where peace wasn't just a dream. The sun began to set over the battlefield, casting a soft golden light across the wreckage. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by a strange silence that seemed to echo in the aftermath of the fight. Adam stood in the middle of it all, his chest heaving with exhaustion. But his mind was clearer than it had been in days. The war was over. The fighting had stopped. And now, for the first time in what felt like forever, he could hear the quiet hum of peace beginning to take root. Kalia stood next to him, her face weary but determined. Her armor was battered, her sword still hanging at her side, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before. It was the light of hope, the glimmer of something better, a future that had seemed impossible not so long ago. The soldiers around them, both human and Zekrian, were scattered across the battlefield, tending to the wounded and clearing the remains of the fight. The enemy forces had been driven back, their resistance crumbling under the weight of a united front. Adam couldn't help but marvel at the sight before him. They had done it. Together, they had brought an end to the war. "It's over," Adam said quietly, almost to himself. "It's really over." Kalia turned to him, her gaze steady. "For now, yes. But it is not the end of our journey. It is only the beginning." Adam nodded. He knew she was right. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. They would have to rebuild both their societies and the trust between them. There were still scars from the conflict, wounds that would take time to heal. But Adam believed in what they had started. He believed that together they could build something better, something lasting. "I don't know if we can do it," Adam said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "The war is over, but can we really change things? Can we make peace last?" Kalia's lips curled into a faint smile. "It will not be easy. There are still those who wish to see the war continue, but we have taken the first step, and that is more than most could ever hope for." Adam glanced at her, his mind racing, with the weight of what they had achieved. It wasn't just the victory on the battlefield that mattered, it was the way they had fought. Together. The Zekrians, once their enemies, had now become allies. The humans who had come into the conflict, with no hope of understanding the alien culture, had learned to trust their former foes. It had all started with one moment, a foolish, unexpected comment. But now that moment had led to something much bigger. They had all chosen to listen to each other, to stand side by side and fight for something more than just survival. "I never thought I'd be standing here with you," Adam said, turning to face Kalia. "I didn't think we could do this. And I never thought I'd see a human who truly understood," Kalia replied, her